Let's begin. The threats are: rook takes pawn, rook takes bishop, queen takes pawn, check, queen takes rook, check, pawn takes bishop. The checks are: queen takes pawn, check, queen to f7, check, queen takes rook, check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook takes pawn, rook takes queen, rook takes queen, check, rook to f8, rook takes rook, check, king takes rook, pawn takes bishop. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in this position are: queen takes pawn, check. The checks are: queen to a8, check, queen to b8, check, queen takes pawn, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle: queen to b8, check, king to g7, queen to e5, check. Let's continue. Threats in this position are: bishop takes pawn, bishop takes knight, rook takes knight, check. The checks are: bishop to b6, check, rook takes knight, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle: rook to c1, rook takes pawn, check, king to a2, rook to b4, rook takes knight, check. One more. Threats in this position are: bishop takes pawn, queen takes pawn, queen takes pawn, rook takes pawn, check, pawn takes pawn. The checks are: rook takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is: queen takes pawn, queen to a1, check, king to b8, b6, queen to d5, queen to h8, check, king to a7. Next puzzle. Here are the threats. There are no threats in this position. Here are the checks: king to h8, check, king to h7, check, king to h6, check. The best move in puzzle position is: king to g6, rook takes pawn, king to f6, check, king to f1, king takes rook. Let's continue. Threats in this position are: king takes rook. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is: rook to b1, a4, rook takes pawn. Let's continue. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is: king to e6, king to f2, king to d5, king to e3, king to c4. Next, the threats are: queen takes knight, check, rook takes pawn. Here are the checks: queen takes knight, check. The puzzle is solved using: queen takes knight, check, rook to g3, queen takes rook, check, king to g2, g6. Another one. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn, queen takes knight, check. Checks in this position are: queen takes knight, check. Answer to this puzzle is: queen takes knight, check, g6, queen takes knight. Another one. The threats are: bishop takes queen, bishop takes pawn, queen takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: bishop takes queen, rook takes rook, check, bishop to g8. Next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: pawn takes rook, queen takes rook. Checks in puzzle position are: rook to c1, check, queen to g1, check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook to c1, check, king to h2, queen takes rook, queen takes queen, pawn takes queen. Next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn, pawn takes knight, knight takes knight, knight takes pawn. Checks in this position are: bishop to h7, check. The best move in puzzle position is: pawn takes knight, queen takes rook, bishop to h7, check, king takes bishop, rook takes queen. Next, let us look at threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is: knight to g5, f6, knight to f7, check. Next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: queen takes rook, check, queen takes knight, queen takes pawn, check. Checks in this position are: queen to d7, check, queen takes rook, check, queen to e7, check, queen to e8, check, queen to f6, check, queen takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is queen takes pawn, check. King to e8. Queen to g6, check. King to d7. Rook to d1, check. King to e7. Queen to d6, check. Next, here are the threats. There are no threats in this position. Checks in this position are queen to b8, check. Queen to h7, check. Queen to h8, check. Answer to this puzzle is queen to h7, check. King to f8. Queen to h8, check. King to e7. Queen takes rook. Queen to f5, check. King to c1. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: there are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is king to e1. Rook to a2. Knight to f4, check. King to f5. Knight takes bishop. Rook to a1, check. King to d2. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Queen takes pawn. Checks in this position are queen to c6, check. Queen to a4, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to e1. Bishop to d6. Queen to a4, check. Bishop to d7. Rook takes queen, check. One more. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Rook takes rook. Checks in puzzle position are rook to c2, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes rook. King takes rook. King to g6. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes knight. Bishop takes pawn. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to c2. Queen to b1. Rook takes pawn, check. Knight takes rook. Bishop takes queen. Another puzzle. Here are the threats. Rook takes rook. Queen takes queen. Bishop takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is rook takes rook. Rook takes rook. Bishop takes knight. Queen takes queen. Knight takes queen. Another puzzle. The threats are queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes rook. Checks in this position are queen takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using rook takes rook. Rook takes rook. Queen to b7. Queen to c6. Queen takes knight. Another puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: there are no threats in this position. The checks are bishop to c1, check. The best move in puzzle position is bishop to e2. Bishop to g7. Bishop takes bishop. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: bishop takes rook. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes knight. Checks in this position are queen takes rook, check. Queen to d1, check. Answer to this puzzle is bishop to g5. Queen takes bishop. Queen takes queen, check. Rook takes queen. Bishop takes rook. Another puzzle. The threats are queen takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes knight. The checks are bishop takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using knight takes pawn. Rook takes knight. Bishop takes rook, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. The threats are queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Bishop takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes rook, check. Checks in puzzle position are queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook takes rook, check. The best move in puzzle position is rook takes rook, check. Queen takes rook. Queen takes pawn, check. King to h8. Queen takes bishop. Rook to e8. Queen to d4. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.